The Memphis Grizzlies let go Taylor Jenkins, and they promote Tomas Isalo as the interim head coach. Look, this team believes they can still get the best out of Ja Morant. They can still get the best out of Zach Edey. Tomas Isalo and his methods could unlock the best version of those players and more. Let's talk about that and more coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome to a shortened edition of a breaking news edition, if you will, of Locked On Grizzlies. My name is Damichael Cole, beat writer for the Commercial Appeal right here in Memphis, Tennessee. Thank you guys for tuning in with me on this newsy edition of Locked On Grizzlies. Shout out to my co-host Joe Monax as well. If you haven't checked out his episode earlier today, his reaction to the Taylor Jenkins firing, make sure you go check out that as well. And it's been a long day. It's been a very long day, but we got a couple things to dive into here to talk about with what's going on with the Grizzlies in this Taylor Jenkins thing. We got 2 segments here. We're gonna talk about the lead up into the firing, and then we're gonna talk about Tomas Isalo, the guy who has been promoted to interim head coach. Some of the things that the team will focus on in this 9 games coming up, starting with the game against the Los Angeles Lakers on Saturday. So we got a lot to kind of dive into, but let's peel back first. And a lot of people ask the question, why now? Right? Why now? And I know Joe Monax, my co-host, touched on this a little bit in the show that he had earlier, but the main reason is the recent struggles and kind of the overall struggles against good teams. The Grizzlies are 11-20 against teams with a record over 500 this season. That alone has kind of led many to believe that the inevitable will be a first-round exit for this team. They can't beat the good teams, and they are kind of walking themselves into a first-round exit. If you saw the Grizzlies earlier this season, a lot of things look good, right? The new offense, the defense was playing well. They were top 10 in both offensive and defensive metrics. But at the same time, you knew that the Grizzlies played one of the weaker schedules in the NBA before the calendar turned to January. Once the calendar flipped, we started to see more weaknesses be exposed. Started to see a lot of the turnover problems. We started to see, some of the defensive issues occur. And then as you started to stack games on top of each other against Western Conference teams and against really good teams, those issues became more and more exposed. And then since the All-Star break, it hasn't been pretty. I mean, many of you have kind of, said that yourselves. It hasn't been fun watching this team. And they are 8-11 since the All-Star break. They can't beat the good teams. Like you talk about this recent road trip. 5-game road trip, the Grizzlies go 1-4. Their only win was against the Utah Jazz, the worst team in the Western Conference record-wise. So look, that does not sound like a team that has the hopes to compete for a championship. And that's kind of where this Grizzlies team is. Look, the success against the winning teams was a big problem. The offensive imagination, right? You come into this season, we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second, but you bring in these coaches and, these new offensive principles, and certain things don't work out. And quite frankly, the offensive efficiency actually improved, but there were still questions about what this offense could look like in the postseason. There were questions about how this offense was, the results they were getting against some of the better teams. And then the defensive problems. And that's where things kind of really reared their head, as the people like to say. Look, as long as the Grizzlies have had Taylor Jenkins here, it's 6 years as a head coach. One thing you've kind of always been able to, pretty much, pencil in with this team is, they're going to have a pretty good defense. They're going to have a pretty good defense. Even last season, despite everything that happened, the Grizzlies had a defense that was in the top half of the league, despite 33, 34 players being on the roster. So the point is, we just didn't see a defensive fall off coming. And since the All-Star break, the Grizzlies have not been a very good defensive team. Their defensive rating is around 120, which is basically 120 points per 100 possessions. Before the All-Star break, they were at about 110 points. So you're talking about nearly a 10-point difference in defensive rating. And look, I talked about it a little bit on here earlier, but after the Grizzlies lost 3 games earlier this month, or 3 games in a row, I believe it was after the game against the Hawks, they had a meeting. Players, coaches were involved. Taylor Jenkins was involved. He led the meeting. It was heavily involved film sessions. Film sessions. They were looking at things. What do we need to fix? How do we fix these things? The main takeaway for me from that was adjustments were made. The Grizzlies came out of that meeting and said, we're going to make some adjustments. And I saw that and I said, okay, I'm going to pencil this in. Let's see if this actually becomes a turning point. See if it actually is. And it did not become a turning point. So when you have those type of meetings where you're emphasizing things and you're saying, hey, we really need to fix this. We're going to change this. We're going to change that. When you have those type of meetings and then you get the same results afterwards, you know what that means? That means that there's probably a problem from a communication standpoint, from the fact that maybe this coach, in this case, Taylor Jenkins, maybe Taylor Jenkins' voice is not resonating with the players like it did last season or 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And talking to some people, around the league about this stuff, and they say, hey, this stuff happens. Sometimes, this happens. But when you talk to, some of the coaches of the past that have worked with Taylor Jenkins and the people around him, they all say the same thing. This is something that Taylor Jenkins has worked really hard to avoid. He's very personable with the players, their families, and all these things. He has worked really hard to avoid losing the players. We're 6 years in, and this is always going to be a relevant point, a relevant conversation to be had. But here we are, and there's strong belief that at this point, after all the struggles, after the meetings and the continual emphasis of fixing things on the defensive end, and the results pretty much being the same, other Grizzlies felt that some change had to be made. So there's a couple other things there as well. I wrote about it over at the Commercial Appeal. Go check out my story over there as well. Kind of an inside detailed look at what went wrong with the Grizzlies. We touch on Zach Edey and his situation. If you've been following Zach Edey, this season, Zach Edey was brought here to be kind of a, this force, for the Grizzlies, who's going to set some big screens. He's going to do a lot of good thing in the pick and roll and whatnot. And he told me straight up, the pick and roll is his favorite offense. And we hadn't seen him in much of those situations. So you factor in all those things with Zach Edey's up and down roll, especially considering the fact the last 3 games he's come off the bench. He's playing more of a reduced role now. You look at how Gigi Jackson's season has went since he's come back, not really being that impactful player that we saw the potential that he could be coming into this season. He has not been that. And, he was sent down to the G League. You look at that. And look, I know a lot of people want to touch on the Desmond Bantonte thing. I said it when it happened. I said I like it. But from an optics standpoint, with everything that's been going on with the Grizzlies, that is something that, probably can, be frowned upon as another example of why this team is probably teetering away, from the voice of Taylor Jenkins. So there are a lot of factors that come into play here. I had people, who told me that even in the case of John Morant, maybe, that there was some frustrations there. And look, I've been in the locker room. I could 100% say there were frustrations on John Morant's part. What I don't know is if they were targeted at Taylor Jenkins. I do not have, any information regarding, straight from John or straight from John's camp that was the case. But, I have been told, from some sources, around the team that, one of John Morant's frustrations was actually that the team wanted him, to play through some of those, bruises and contusions that he was dealing with. But it wasn't something that he wasn't always comfortable with. And look, that is something that, if you remember that OKC game earlier this month, the home game, not the last road game, that was a game where John Morant played, struggled after missing 2 games, and he said, I should not have played. So, look, I have not heard that directly from John Morant or his camp overall, but that is something that people have kind of, pointed to as maybe a sense of John Morant's frustrations as well. We got a lot more to talk about. We got to get into the future. What's next? Tomas Salo is stepping in as the interim head coach. We're going to talk about what he's going to bring to the Grizzlies coming up here on Locked On Grizzlies. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But before we get to that, today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Look, daylight saving time snuck up on us again, and if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. So whether you're staying up late watching the NCAA tournament, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep yourself busy, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pickup whenever you need it. And it's perfect for the on-the-go convenience. Whether I'm at a game or I'm traveling, 5 Hour Energy is easy to grab and keeps me feeling refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, peach mango, and many others. You can even build your own 12-pack, or if you want a 24-pack, you can do that too. And you can get it delivered right to your door. And if you want one right now, it's simple. Grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery store or your convenience store, because they're everywhere. You can find them everywhere. So stock up today and stay energized right now with 5 Hour Energy. Make sure you head over to 5hourenergy.com to take advantage of that right now. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by FanDuel. Look, March Madness is going on. You got opening day, the first couple games of the MLB season. Baseball is back. March Madness is here. Look, FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can bet $200 in bonus bets. Well, you can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's it. $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters. Look, there ain't really many Cinderellas left, but you can figure out who's cutting down the nets. Go take advantage of that right now. It's a simple thing to do. You can pick the favorites. Look, every year, everyone has their eyes on the underdogs when it comes to March Madness. You can stay involved in the action. Again, with baseball getting started, you can make some first inning bets, second inning bets. You want to get in early on the games, or you can just go straight up and bet the money line and pick a team to win, or you can just bet the spread. So many ways to get in on the action. Just visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops and MLB action that's going on right now. Make sure you go over to FanDuel.com to take advantage of that right now. Tuasa Salo was named the interim coach for the Memphis Grizzlies, and he's going to step in for Taylor Jenkins, who was let go early on Friday. And we talked about Tuasa Salo on this show before. So many of you, shout out to the Everydayers. Shout out to the Everydayers because you've heard the name. You may recall the one game that he coached this season, ironically, was against the Lakers. Grizzlies win against the Lakers. He coached earlier this season. But now, what to expect from Tuasa Salo. And here's the thing, and this is where more context needs to be added from the first segment as well. The Grizzlies also fired Noah LaRoche and Patrick St. Andrews, excuse me. They fired two other coaches in addition to Taylor Jenkins. Patrick St. Andrews was the defensive coordinator for the Grizzlies. He was the guy. I mean, we think of Taylor Jenkins as the person who mainly mans the defense because he's been here and he's a defensive-minded coach. Patrick St. Andrews is the guy who's basically been his right hand for the defense. He's gone. So the Grizzlies are clearly trying to go in a different direction and coordinating their defense. And the other thing is, what about Noah LaRoche? Why was he let go? It's his first season with the Grizzlies. It was Patrick St. Andrews' second season. It's his first year. Why was he let go? Well, here's the thing. When Tuasa Salo and when Tuasa Salo and Noah LaRoche were brought in, they were two of the guys who were kind of envisioned as these new offensive guys who are going to help shift the way the Grizzlies offense is viewed. Here's the thing is when it comes to Noah LaRoche. When we talked about the Grizzlies, not using the screens as much, this cutting-based offense, where a lot of dribble drives and things like that, that was more of Noah LaRoche and some of the things he brought to the Grizzlies. So what you saw most of this season was more of Noah LaRoche's principles for the Grizzlies offense than Tuasa Salo. Salo, if you want to dig into his background, was known more as a pick and roll guy. This is a guy who some people call a pick and roll expert, in how he, conducted that style of offense in the Euro Cup. So the Grizzlies, if you watch the Grizzlies this season, you didn't see a heavy use of pick and roll. If you watch them the past few years, you have. But this is Tuasa Salo's first season. And The thought when you brought him in was that he had this imaginative mind with the pick and roll. Look, the Grizzlies tried to go away from the pick and roll. It didn't work. I think in today's league, you're going to need to have some usage, a little bit higher usage than what the Grizzlies try of the pick and roll. And quite frankly, it fits some of your better players. As we mentioned earlier, Zach Edey said, that's my favorite type of offense. Now, he wasn't trying to, say, oh, I want the Grizzlies to do it more or anything. I had asked him, about his comfort level now that the Grizzlies were starting to increase they had an uptick in pick and rolls. And he said, yes, that's my favorite type of offense, because it was clear the success that he was having when the Grizzlies went to that. With Ja Morant, what's understood doesn't have to be explained, is what the people say. But we're going to explain it. Ja Morant in pick and rolls, that's his bread and butter. When he's able to dissect the defense, use his playmaking ability, get to the floater, get to the mid-range jumper, and pretty much put the defense at his mercy when he has a 7-foot big who's setting the screen, getting the guard off him, and he's putting the guard on his back, or he has a big in front of him. That opens up Ja Morant's game to a whole nother level. We talked about the fact that, look, as amazing as Ja Morant is with the Grizzlies, one thing that he is not graded out as great as overall, despite what we see in the fourth quarter in call 12, where it feels like he answers the phone every single time. If you look at the overall numbers, Ja Morant has been below a league average in isolation scoring. He's been below league average. But this new offense that the Grizzlies installed this season, with all the dribble drives and things like that, kind of put him in a lot of positions where he had to do a lot of isolation scores, because he didn't have those screens being set on the ball. And he played off the ball a little bit more. So when you factor in all of that, there was a belief that this did not bring the best version of Ja Morant. Well, with Tomasi Salo, with his heavy usage of pick and roll and some of the concepts that he adds around the pick and rolls, the belief is that he can unlock a better version of Ja Morant, better version of Zach Edey, and kind of maximize the effort around the team, around that. So that'll be interesting to see, because the Grizzlies only have 9 games left. And Ja Morant, he's questionable for the Lakers game, so we'll see, if he plays. If you saw my story the day before, the fact that he has been upgraded to day-to-day, so he's been close to being back. So here's the thing. Ja Morant's pretty much close to being back. The Grizzlies have 9 games left, and Tomasi Salo is going to hit the ground running. They're going to see what they can do going into the playoffs. There are not high expectations. I don't think the Grizzlies are putting any pressure on him saying, hey, go in here and win 2 playoff series or else. There's nothing like that. They're simply going to see what happens here and kind of, figure things out after that. So basically, the Grizzlies get the coach in Tomasi Salo, who, was brought in kind of to bring more imagination to the pick and roll. The Grizzlies kind of abandoned the pick and roll over the course of the season, but we'll see. We'll get a glimpse. I mean, it's going to be a tough task for him. He only has 9 games here. They got a couple back-to-backs. So it's going to be a tough task. It'll be interesting to see how the Grizzlies kind of try to reinvent the wheel, what they keep, what they take away. We'll talk to, Salo before the game against the Lakers. I'll have coverage of it at the Commercial Appeal. And we'll also talk to Zach Kleiman. We'll talk to him tomorrow as well to kind of get more insight onto why this decision was made on Taylor Jenkins. So make sure you go check out all my coverage at thecommercialappeal.com for all the information and insight on that. But until then, remember that Locked On Grizzlies is free and available wherever you get your podcast. Me and Joe Mullinax will be back with you on Monday. We'll have a Lakers game to break down, as well as Tomasi Salo's first comments with the Grizzlies, what Zach Kleiman said, and much more. Look, this season was already interesting. It just got even more interesting. No more Taylor Jenkins. Great man. I enjoyed covering Taylor Jenkins over the past 4 years. Talking to a lot of people today, some of the things that people said to me or things like, again, like I mentioned earlier, how personable he was, all those great things. So in my experience with covering Taylor Jenkins, that's exactly what I saw. I'm sure he'll land on his feet somewhere else going forward. There's going to be a team out there that takes a chance on Taylor Jenkins. But thank you guys for tuning in to Locked On Grizzlies with me. Remember, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get podcasts, Locked On Grizzlies is there. Until next time, I'm Damichael Cole, and we'll see you on Locked On Grizzlies.